Lassman,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. How are you today?
Well, I'm up too early and I know you are. Actually, you're up late, huh?
It's 7 hours ahead here. It's been a long day already.
Well, everybody's ahead of me usually, so that's no surprise.
You know, I learned long ago that when people say things like that, they're already 2 steps ahead.
Good to be with y'all this morning.
Well, thank you for carving out time. We're gonna have a little conversation. I'm at the COP27 meetings in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt. We're gonna have conversations from the COP. Really happy to have you, Representative Weber, join us. And we'll be sharing some of this with our friends at National Review Online. I know they care about what you have to say about energy policy. So if we can, I know we don't have a lot of time. Let's just dive right in. I want to get your view. America's been sending people to these meetings now for 30 years. What do you make of this UN formula for coming up with global climate policy? How are we doing with that?
Well, you know what? America is in the lead and should be in the lead, Kent. We know that because we can produce energy cleaner than any other country. We know we've proven it because we're doing it. And as you probably heard me say back at the whatever that was here several weeks back, was that fossil fuels is not the enemy. It's emissions that are the enemy. And so we don't want America to be beholden to anybody else's time frame or spending a lot of money when other countries are not going to conform. And so I think America is in a good place if the administration and if Congress will get gear behind this, that I want America to be in the lead. And I don't think we need the leadership of the UN or anybody else telling us what to do. We can lead by example.
Now, does it make sense to have continued participation in these multilateral agreements on emissions when big emitters like China and India and Russia don't play by the same rules? What should we take?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. No, it doesn't make any sense. All we're going to do, and we've been doing, is hamstringing, use an old Texas word, of the American energy sector and the American economy. And quite frankly, I would say that energy security is national security. And so that's all we're doing is affecting America in a negative way. And you know this, strategic petroleum reserves, almost 60% of them are housed in my district, 14 along the Gulf Coast of Texas. And our next door neighbor, Louisiana, that other foreign country, has the other part of SPR. And so it's very, very important to us. Energy security is national security. And we ought to be in tune with this. I'm talking about the administration. I'm talking about Congress. I'm talking about the states. I'm talking about all the agencies. This is important.
And one thing I've been greatly troubled by, I wanted to get your reaction to, and that is the idea, we had this big Inflation Reduction Act that had hundreds of billions of dollars going toward electrification of our economy, green subsidies fueled by debt. So it's all borrowed money and it's being poured into subsidies. Is it possible to move forward based on debt and subsidies, or do we have to create and innovate a little bit more?
Well, it's not possible to move forward increasing debt. And that's something that's always on my mind, Republicans, especially conservatives, because we can't keep building our debt. And no, I don't know what the current figures are. I remember the last figures I saw on electric vehicle sales, for example, are like 2% of vehicle sales. Now you're seeing a move toward those. You're seeing manufacturers come out with more and more electric vehicle lines. Good for them. That's great for them. Let the free market economy set this. Free market set this. If people want EVs, electric vehicles, they'll go out and they'll buy them. But those people also need to be responsible for a way to charge those electric vehicles, number one. Number two, it's going to require a stronger electric grid, a more capable electric grid to do that. And so I don't think we need to be digging our debt hole deeper. I don't think we need subsidies. I think that the market ought to speak. And I'm, as a Republican, conservative Republican, I'm all for renewable energies. And you probably know this. Texas is the #1 wind energy state in the country. We're #2 on solar panels, second only to California. So we believe in renewables, and we have our own grid. ERCOT, 85% of the state's electrical grid. And we experienced Winter Storm Uri 2 Februaries ago, where the grid had the perfect storm. It was colder on the Gulf Coast, Texas, I've ever seen it. And we learned that resiliency and some redundancy is going to be required, but it has to be by a reliable, dependable, affordable source. And right now that is fossil fuels. That's natural gas is the cleanest. And we would even throw in nuclear in there. Texas gets 20% of its energy from wind generation. I think it's 5 point something from solar panels. So no, I think we let the market economy set it. We have got to have this reliance on affordable, reliable, dependable fossil fuels. And I would add the president should not be depleting the strategic petroleum reserve, because if you're watching what's going on over in Europe with Russia and whatnot, and with China, and with Iran, and there's people who hate us, and that strategic petroleum reserve, in my opinion, needs to be left there for a reason that's, I don't know, strategic, not to buy votes in an election, not to forgive college student loan debt, but actually to use if we were to need it in a great time of emergency.
And one thing that would take a little pressure off of that reserve, that insurance policy that we have, is if we could export or even ship within the United States more of that Texas energy. Anything you want to add today about the Jones Act, how that affects your look?
Yeah, I know that comes into play in terms of flag moving ships going different places, but let me go back to the Texas energy part. President Biden went over to the Saudis here, I don't know, what was it, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and said, and I'm going to paraphrase, begged them to produce more oil, and we're thinking, why didn't he come to Texas and beg Texas to produce more oil? We could do it. Keystone Pipeline would have come into my district and carries 830,000 barrels of oil a day. The Colonial Pipeline system that was shut down by hacking carries 3.1 million barrels of product to the southeastern part of the United States. The Keystone Pipeline is 1/4 the output. We can produce energy right here, and we've got to get off this, I don't know what the term for it is, this mantra of fossil fuel bad, fossil fuel bad. We can produce energy cleanly. We've proven that we can capture carbon and store it. I have the country's largest carbon capture sequestration storage facility in my district over in Port Arthur, Texas. We can do this. Why do we want to reach out to other countries? Why do we want to be shackled with other countries and a plan that, as you already rightly pointed out, Kent, they're not going to abide by? They're not going to live by the rules. They're going to do whatever they please. And the stats on how many coal plants China's putting in. And by the way, it really is geopolitical security around the world, if you ask me, because we can go to those developing countries that are developing and they need energy, and we can show them how, and they need clean water and energy. We can show them how to use, if they buy natural gas from us, or if they can drill their own oil wells and produce it cleanly. We can get those developing countries to be able to develop their economies and be better off. The women and girls, for example, they spend a lot of their time cooking and cleaning and washing every day because they got to walk back and forth to go get clean water. We could actually be the world leader in helping developing countries, but it's going to require fossil fuel. They won't be able to do it with less reliable solar panels and wind energy. They won't. And so I think it's geopolitical world security for that matter.
But I really appreciate you bringing in that moral dimension. I think it's important that when we talk about growth, we're not just talking about growth of GDP. We're not talking about growth of bank accounts or profits or things like that. We're talking about growth of the way people live in a healthy, secure, educated environment. And things like water and regular electricity, in some parts of the world, that's the difference between a health clinic or a school and not having a health clinic or a school. I sometimes find myself talking more often as it is with lawmakers who know a lot about these issues, like yourself. You're rooted right in that Texas economy where energy is produced. What is one thing that you'd like me to be pressing with your colleagues? What is it that other lawmakers don't understand about the future of energy and the environment?
Well, I think the simple part of it, Ken, I appreciate your mindset on that. Thank you for asking that question, being willing to take up that banner, for lack of a better term. It sounds really interesting, almost electrifying, quite frankly. But at any rate, what I think that we ought to be saying is, look, this is not an either or. It's not. We don't have to do away with all of fossil fuel, as I point out. We can do it cleanly. They want, and unfortunately, what has devolved in this discussion is that if you have questions about climate change, however you choose to phrase it, want to look at it, then some of those on the other side of this equation will say, well, you're a climate denier. You don't believe in science. And we're not saying that. We're saying, look, we trust science. It's hard for me to envision that we can predict the world, the temperature of the earth 50 years out. I mean, it's hard enough for us to do it, predict temperatures and storms a week or a month or a year out, much less 50 years. Nonetheless, we can produce energy cleanly. Can we quit the arguing and name calling back and forth? And can we agree that fossil fuel is going to play an, obviously for national security, we're talking about jets, tanks, we're talking about aircraft carriers, we're talking about submarines, is going to play a huge point. I talked to one of the subcommittee chairmen here, I don't know, a couple of months about coming to a nuclear energy meeting with me. One night after votes, he said, no, he would never be interested in nuclear until we proved we could do it safely. And I said, look, we do that all the time. I can prove that with 2 words: nuclear submarines. So if they would admit that there are other forms of energy that we ought to be, for lack of a better term, tied to, using, dependent on, yes, let's develop as much renewables as we can. Yes, let's let the marketplace have its part in developing that. But let's all admit it's going to take an all of the above. You've heard that. Hadn't heard that in a while. You don't hear that so much anymore. An all of the above portfolio for us to use energy. And we ought to agree on that and quit the argument.
Very good. I think that might need to be our last word. Somebody arguing for a positive sum vision as opposed to just trading on a limited pie. I think that might be the best thing we can get out there in the world. Congressman,
I think you're on to something.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again, whether it's down in Houston like last time, on the computer like this, or up on Capitol Hill.
Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you for the work you're doing.
I appreciate that. You take care now and have a good day.
You too.